Rabbi, welcome back to Yerushalmi Demai. We are in the fifth parak, right? Which is roughly that's 39b. Okay. Now we are talking about how we are separating maestros from a dough or bread of Demai. So, halekeach bin hanachtim. You take a dough or a baked bread from a baker, and he makes bread in order to earn money by selling it all. Keitzad me'aser. So how are you going to take maser over here? The baker we're talking about here is an Amoretz. Okay, that's how most want to learn. Okay, there's always a discussion whether he's a chaver or not. There's discussion over there, but let's go for now and say he's an Amoretz. So Naitel. Now, what we're going to do is take a part of the bread of the loaf. We are going to have in mind sort of an area, designate an area, Kedei Trumas Maaseh v'Chala. So we're going to afterwards separate the Trumas Maaseh and the Chala. Right, Chala, remember, is 1 in 48, and Trumas Maaseh is roughly the 1%, because it's a tenth of the Maaseh, right, which is a tenth of what's left after the Truma has been taken. So we're going to, that's the amount which we will eventually give to the Cohen. So first we will designate virtually, right? This is your first virtual designation, okay? We will designate the part which we are going to give to the Cohen at the end of the Hafrosha. So that's the amount that we intend to give eventually of Trumas Maaseh and Chala. Right? Trumas Maaseh is 1 of 100. Trumas Maaseh is a tenth of the Maaseh Rishon, which is a tenth of the loaf. The Chala with the bakers is 1 in 48. And therefore the difference that you're going to be mafresh is 1 in 100 and also 1 in 48, which is slightly more than 3% of the loaf. Okay, now we're not separating it yet. First we're going to give names to the various elements, right? Trumas, Maaseh and Chala. And then we're going to cut a tiny bit maybe. At the moment we'll just cut it apart, and that will be a siman, a sign where the part that I'm going to separate will come from. Okay? And after that, once we've called the names of Maisa and Chala, then we will separate it, we'll give it to the Cohen. Now, why we have to first leave it all connected, in order to say the Nusach of the Hafrosha, which the Mishnah will tell us, you have to give a name to the other things, Maaseh Rishon next to it. Remember, we can't call something Trumas Maaseh until we have Maaseh. So we have to call a name to the area of Maaseh. And also you have to separate Harav, which is next to you, Min HaMukaf. It's got to be close to what you're being mafresh. So that's why we're going to do it in this way, in this fashion. Okay.
And what we're saying is, who was saying the Chiv Schal?
So we on this baker. In the Gemara elsewhere, when we spoke about a baker, we said it always depended on how much he was selling, and what quantity, and whether he's selling it cheaply or not. And then if he was selling it cheaply, then you put it on the buyer. If he was selling it more expensive, then let someone in. If it was more expensive, then then we said it was on the baker. But unfortunately here we're assuming now, we'll discuss it, we're assuming now the baker's an Amoretz. So therefore we don't assume that the baker took everything. So therefore we have to. So the Kech ben Anachton. So what was the case of Maaseh? So we said, so you are having in mind your virtual future separation of your 3%, which will cover your Trumas Maaseh and your Chala, and you'll give it to the Cohen. And you say, 1/100th of what I have here in this loaf. So this will be next to the part that I've designated, Maaseh, Ushah HaMaaseh, and the rest of the Maaseh as well. That's the Maaseh Rishon, which is another 9/100ths. Will be in the rest of the loaf, Samach line next to it. So basically you're having in mind, we're just starting the fifth parak, yeah? So you're having in mind that I've got my 100th, which I'm designating as part of my bit to separate, and another 9/100ths next to it will be Maaseh, alright, and that is now my Maaseh now. So, and then, the 1 of the 100th, which I've designated, will be the bit that I'm going to be mafresh, which is that designated area. Okay, 9/100ths we said next to it, I'll end up keeping, right? The Maaseh Rishon at this stage, I'm going to keep that. But that's the process. So you've got to, in order to make the Trumas Maaseh, you have to separate the Maaseh, right? So we've got to have the Maaseh element in order to have the Trumas Maaseh, okay? Why the baker only separates 1 in 48, Balabayis separates 1 in 24, And here, if the person, though the person buying it is a balabais, but you only have to separate 1 in 48 because challah is challah at the time of making the dough. The dough was done through the baker. Therefore, you also only have to separate more. You don't have to do more than what the baker's obligation was. Okay? Right, let's carry on. And actually, so what we're saying here, the 9 portions of the Maser Rishon you'll end up keeping. So that stays in the loaf. So it's the only bits that you're going to take off are the Trumas Maser and the Challah bits, which you'll separate soon. Okay. Right, let's carry on. This 1 in 100 in my designated area, She'asisi Maser, which first I made Maser, that 100th also Trumas Maser Olav will now be the Trumas Maser on the rest of the Maser. V'hasha, and the rest of that area which I have designated. So remember, you designated roughly 3% in total. The rest of it is Challah. This idea, by the way, 1 in 48. Some poskim say that if you have a challah or whatever it is, and a bit's broken off, as long as 1 in 48 is not lost more than 1 in 48, you can treat it as a shalem. You can treat it as a whole for lechem mishnah. The same with the matzah as well, right? Because the baker always took off 1 in 48. You see. What? I know, but the idea then that some of the poskim bring down, as long as it's less than 1/48 missing, you can call it shalem anyway. So there we are.
Like 2%.
Yeah. Now, what about the rest of the loaf which you're keeping in your hand? Masechet, which is either b'tzvona or b'droim, but you want it to be in the north or in the south of the loaf, and that will be redeemed onto the money which I have designated for that purpose. Right? Okay. That's like 1/10 of what's left in the loaf, and you designate an area, 1/10 in the north or in the south. You need to designate it. You can't call it master without designating a place. You don't have to physically separate it from the loaf in a situation where you're redeeming it onto money. You only have to redeem it onto its own value, right? You don't have to add a 5th because it's Demai here. And of course you have to take that money to Yerushalmi. Okay? So, now we said in the Mishnah, so you are the purchaser now on the part of Maser which is Mafresh. He said 1/100th which is here is Maser. So he says, wait a minute, 1/100th of what's here? It sounds like from all that's here throughout the loaf, it comes out you're separating Maser of Demai Af al Challah, even on that Challah element as well. Is that what you're doing? Now the question is, what comes first, Challah or Maser? Where's Challah in the list? He says, Challah chayaves b'Demai. Okay, is Challah obligated in Demai that you have to separate Maestris on the Challah? Like Tanina, have we not learned Challah Sama Aretz Mamaduva? Paturi Mila Demai. It's exempt from Demai. Challah is part of from Demai. Because Challah, people treated it as the importance like Truma, right? They were very careful with Truma. And you don't have to assume that there should be any Maestr obligation here. We've learned out Mishnah that it's Chaim to be Mafresh Challah from Maestris from Demai. So the Gemara answers, Rabacha b'shem Rabubun Barchia b'shem Rabbi Yosef Chanina Demei Shammai, and Mishnah's view of Bei Shammai, who argue on the Mishnah earlier on, they hold Challah is obligated in Demai. The Tani came with that, Rishon ben Yehudaim and Rishon Rabbi Shimon, Challah, Bei Shammai mechayvit, yes, Bei Shammai obligates the Demai, so you have to separate Maestros and everything, Beis Hillel Poitrin, Beis Hillel exempt it. Okay. Okay. Now, Klum Amru Beis Shammai, but when did Beis Shammai say that Chalas Amaretz is Chai B'Demai, and it's Davar Shehu La'achila, something is going to be eaten? If you buy produce from Amaretz for sowing, or Lebehema for animals to eat, or Kemach La'eres, flour for tanning skins, Shema L'ner and fuel, Shema Eda Potter B'Demai, even according to Beis Shammai should be Potter then. You're Potter because if you buy produce for the sake of other uses, you're Potter from Demai. We don't find anywhere Beis Shammai argue on that. Now, Mishnah, you're taking a dough or bread from a baker in Amaretz, you assume it's Tameh. So even Beis Shammai will agree, the Challah you've got to be Mafresh, is part of a Maestros of Demai. It's Tameh. It's not going to be eaten by anyone, right? It needs to be burnt. So even if there's no stira between our Mishnah and the Mishnah earlier on, with Patas Challah Amaretz B'Demai, we have that contradiction between what we learned in the ratio of the Mishnah, if you buy Demai, not for the sake of eating, you're Potter according to everyone. So the Gemara answers, we can still explain our Mishnah according to Beis Shammai. Ela megabel isasa b'mei peres. You know what? This baker, who's an Amaretz, he made his dough with fruit juice, 100% fruit juice, where it's not machshir, it doesn't make the food susceptible to receive tumah, okay? He didn't use water, so the dough is tahor, and the challah which is taken is fitting to be eaten. And therefore, you can be mafresh maestros of Demai according to the view of Beis Shammai. Okay, so that's what we're saying, that he used fruit juice. Now, it's not muksha at all to receive tumah. Like then this one says, wait a minute. Like the Mishnah in Challah there, that if it's made with fruit juice, the Rebbe Lezer ben Yehuda ishbar tusahi. That's all very well according to that one view. The Chachamim argue, and they say, look, a dough which is made with fruit juice is completely potter from Challah. Right? The Mishnah in Challah it talks about a dough which is made with mei peros. Rebbe Chanina, that's Rebbe Lezer ben Yehuda said this. Okay, it's full yom. Okay, so Oichel Kabbalah Tumah. Okay, the discussion there. The others argue. They hold no. So here as well now, Hakrabanin, but according to the Chachamim who pattern this dough from challah anyway, if it's made with fruit juice, the whole obligation doesn't start. Like, you can't fit in our Mishnah that he made the dough with fruit juice. It's not chayav of challah at all. You have to tell me it was made with water, and that's why it's chayav challah. So the question comes back that the bread of an amoritz, which was susceptible to receive tumah, is becheskas tameh, and the challah that you separate from it needs to be burnt. And it's not chayav d'mai according to everyone, because it's not there for fitting for anyone to eat. So the Gemara says another way to answer the Mishnah. We are talking about challah which is tahor, and it is chayav d'mai, and yes, you do have to separate the maestros for that challah according to Beis Shammai. And if you want to answer our Mishnah's talk about being mafresh challah d'mai, and it holds like Beis Shammai, like Rabbi Yochanan. Surely we can do it. This is whether I like this wording here. Like Rabbi Yochanan makan ba'isa b'tahara. Here we're talking in the Perek Sheni, we're talking about a baker who makes the dough in Tahara. Khan in the 5th Perek, Ba'isa B'tumah, he's making his dough in a state of Tumah. So according to this, our Mishnah is talking about a baker who's making a dough in a state of Tumah. You can't tell me it's Demai and Beis Shammai, because the whole thing is Tameh, therefore the challah is not fitting to be eaten, and it's completely potter, even according to Beis Shammai. Ela, Kurbalaza, Kurbalaza, Makan Bekam, whether it's our Mishnah or the Mishnah in the 2nd Perek. The baker is doing his dough in a state of purity, right? And it's huksha to be mekabel tumah if it touches tumah, but he guarded it. He was very careful with it, okay? He was careful to stop it becoming tameh. Now, we have actually a contradiction between our Mishnah and Perek Beis. There's other answers given for that. There he talks about the difference between the baker. Is it mass production or not mass production? And the price is, does he make a lot on it or does he not make a lot on it, as we said before? Our Mishnah is talking about is selling a lot in one go, where we're allowing him to sell it without being ma'aser and mafresh challah. Okay, so there we are. So basically, based on this pshat, we're talking about pas which is tahor, and the challah is fitting to be eaten, and it's chayav d'mai according to Beis Shammai, who obligate challah with d'mai. Now the problem is, our Mishnah is talking about pas which is tahor, okay, and the baker is trusted on taharas. Now, if that's the case, why should there be a din of Demai at all? If we trust him as far as Taharas is concerned, as far as purity is concerned, right, the usual rule, if you're believed on Taharas, you should be believed on Maestros, right? You should be believed on Maestros. It comes out this Chaver is believed on Maestros, and we're not talking about Amaretz then. If he's trusted him so much on Taharas, then he's not an Amaretz. Then he probably took all the Maestros that were required to be taken, and he separated Challah properly. But our Mishnah says you have to take Maaseh from this bread. So obviously we're talking about Amoritz who's not Ne'eman, who's not believed on Maestros. So the Gemara doesn't actually answer. So the Gemara actually, does say, he said, when we said he's believed on Taharas, he's believed on Maestros, it's where you are eating with this person, the guest. You are the guest. Someone who's trusted on Taharas, you can rely on him that he took the Maisa, which he's bringing you, and you can eat it without taking Maisa. But he's not got a din of a chaver in every respect, if he's not taken on that standard, okay? And therefore, if you're buying things from him, you cannot rely on the fact that the Maisa has been taken. You follow this. Even though he's believed on Taharas, it's one thing when you're a guest. But when you're buying from him, you cannot assume that all the Maestros have been taken. And bring a proof of this, because like Tanya, never on the Taharas, never on the Maestros. That you are believed on Taharas, you're believed on Maestros. So to me say, and on this Brisa, Rabbi Yana, Rabbi Shmuel Ba'ama, he says, that's all very well. So when you're staying with him. As far as people buying from him, mass sales, who, this person, Eina Neman, you cannot assume all the maestros have been taken until he takes on publicly to be responsible in all these elements. In our Mishnah, we're talking about the baker sells to the masses. You're buying from the baker. You're buying from him. You're not staying with him. Therefore, he may be believed as far as Taharas is concerned, but you can't rely on him as far as maestros, and you have to separate maestros and challah from that which you're buying from him. Okay, so that's how we've answered that. Mishnah's talking about you're being mafresh maestros on the challah according to Beis Shammai. There is an obligation of challah maestros of demai because we're talking about it's tahar and it's taken to be eaten and not for burning. And although we know he guarded the dough in a state of purity, he's not believed to say he took maestros from it, and you have to separate maestros on the challah, and your mafresh maestros also on the challah because it is tahar. Now the Gemara brings another answer to the contradiction between our Mishnah and the Mishnah of the first parak which patters challah from demai. He learned the answer from the Mishnah later on, which is after our Mishnah, where it says, if you want to separate from your fruit, truma or trumas maseh ka'achas, so you got your truma, which is your 2%, your trumas maseh is your 1%, and you want to take basically you take a share of 1 in 33 1/3, it's roughly 3%, and you say, 1 of the 100 which is here, next to this should be chulin. For now, it's chulin until I give it a name of Truma Gedola, and then I'll give the name Maser Rishon. I'll make the first one Trumas Maser out of the Maser which I have, and the rest, the other 2%, is Truma Gedola. So Kamada Tema Tamam, just like you have to say over there, when you're saying 1 in 100 which is here, is 1 in 100 which you have chutz min aroy likadosh l'shem Truma, which is apart from that which is going to be Truma. You're not mafresh maser rishon and Trumas maser on Truma Gedola, right? Truma Gedola has to be first in the order. Whatever comes first is potted from the next one that comes down the line, right? Your Truma doesn't have to have maser taken, right? First you take Truma, then you take maser what's left. So the same thing, you don't have to be mafresh for what comes later. But hacha, so here as well, in our Mishnah, when it says 1 in 100, which is here and it should be maser, it means the 1 in 100 which I have, chutz min aroy likadosh l'shem challah. Apart from that which is going to have a name challah, you don't have to be mafresh maser and truas maser on challah, and that's like Beis Hillel and the Brisa that challah is potted from maestros. Okay. Now, once we taught you the way of the order of calling the names of Maser Rishon and Trumas Maser, it talks about the name of challah. So Tanina, we've learned. Now, where is challah in the list? Where does it come? Where is the order of challah? So we've learned in our Mishnah, challah bein rishon l'sheni. Now we spoke about calling challah once you've done maser rishon and you've not done maser sheni yet. Now why is maser rishon coming before challah? The Torah calls challah truma. Truma comes before everything else because it's called reishis. Okay, if that's the case, challah, which is also called truma, should be coming before maser rishon. So Rabbi Yoina v'Shei Zira. So it's a merz challah ein ba mishum bal ta'acher. Basically, there's no isur with challah of changing the order of things. The Torah was not particular only on the Seder of Bikurim, Trumas, Maestros. It seems Challah didn't really matter where it went in the list. Rabbi Yosef Zira, he says, Ein Mishnah Mura al Seder. The truth is no, don't learn from the Mishnah that that's the order. You do need to put Challah first. And if you're mafresh it after Maser Rishon, you are transgressing. But the Tana wasn't careful in his wording. The Tana wasn't being specific in the order, but really you should put Challah first. Now, the din of the Gemara is based on the understanding that in our Mishnah you have to separate the matanas in the order. He says, "V'lo b'demai nan kiyamin." But wait a minute, we're talking about demai here. Like Cain Ara Rabbi Bar Rabbi Chia b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan Masnisa b'demai. Our Mishnah is talking about demai, and that's why you can do things in the wrong order because we're talking about demai here. Oh, vadai, if it's definitely tevel, lie, you can't change from the order. So what he's saying is, when we said, if you change from the order in Demai, it doesn't really matter. And even the Chatchila you're allowed to change, because Demai, you're allowed to change the order. Here in our Mishnah, we're talking about Demai. So how are you telling me, Challah, it doesn't matter where you put it? No, it's because it's Demai here. Why does Rabbi Yossi need to push away, we weren't careful with the order? No, with Demai, there's no order at all with Demai. Remember, Demai is always after the event. Probably everything's been done. It's only a Chiyah Dravanon in case something wasn't being done. So the Gemara answers, the Machlokes Reb Zira and Yossi is not fitting in with our Mishnah. In the case of our Mishnah, everyone says, yes, you can do whatever you want, order you want. But Tiny Reb Chia learned a brisa which mentions challah between Maser Rishon and Maser Sheni. After Vada, even with Vadai, definite Tebel, challah comes after Maser Rishon, before Maser Sheni. And this was the argument. He says so one opinion says, right, there's no problem where you put it. He says, Mishnah, that brisa Reb Chia Amora said, no, it wasn't right. And really, you should put challah right before Maser Rishon. You should put it right at the beginning. Don't put it before Truma. The Truma is chal in the goren, right? When all the grain has been processed before the chiyuv challah, right? He says if you delay the hafrosha's Truma until it's become a dough, then you have to still do the hafrosha of Truma before challah, right? Although Maser Rishon is also in the goren, but challah comes first because just like Truma comes first. Because challah is called Truma. Yeah? You got that phrase, Truma. And challah, it's where it says rashis as well. So it comes first. It doesn't come before Truma. Truma always comes first. Truma is called rashis, and the chiyuv comes before challah. Okay. Now, the Gemara asked Rabbi Yossi that you have to separate challah before Maser Rishon with definite tevel. May I answer if that's the case? Lo tehei challah chayavis b'maestris. But maestris, you chayavin b'challah. Now, if challah comes first, then as we said, there's always a rule. If you offer something first, there's no obligation for what comes later. So challah should have no maestris obligation at all, because maestris comes later on. But maestris, you chayavin b'challah. And maestris should have an obligation for challah because challah comes first. Because challah kodev is chaver, whatever comes first, chaver is chayav boy, is obligated with what comes first. But it's not chayav in itself. So challah, if coming before maestris with tevel, according to Rabbi Yossi, shouldn't be obligated in maestris. Mishnah says challah of Demai is potter from maestris, implying that challah of tevel is chayav in maestris.
This would be mashma that the chiyuv is challah on the baker, because the lokeach would come once the loaf is already baked.
Yeah, normally it's when it's in the dough. But usually it's the kneading.
Challah from an amoret, ready baked.
We're worried it wasn't done.
So you do it anyway. So you're doing it. After all the Trumas and Maestros, you were doing the challah.
Yes, true. It will come later on. It's Demai. Normally, you would do it in the dough stage, right? When you're making the dough, that's when the obligation starts. So here, challah of tevel sounds like it's chayav maestros. Now, this challah, there must obviously not be a seder when you need to be mafresh it. It could be mafresh it after maestros as well. That's the only way you can say it's chayav maestros. And that's not like Rabbi Yossi, who says, no, you have to do it before maestros. But the Tali case, the Gemara answers, if you're not making a dough from tevel, whether you separated the challah before the truma, or truma before the challah, what's done is done. Now, whatever happens, don't start eating the challah until the truma has been separated, and truma shouldn't be separated until you mafresh the challah. As you see, whatever comes first, Seder HaFrosh is not chayav the other one. That wasn't said as far as challah. Truma definitely has to come before challah, and still we say that if you did the truma first, it's still chayav and challah. So the same thing, challah is chayav b'maestros. Even though min adin, it comes first according to Rabbi Yossi, it seems challah there's no exemption. It sounds like challah is still chayav. This din of whatever comes later is exempt from it. Doesn't seem to apply with challah. So the Gemara comes back to the Pirush of the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yoina Shem Rav Zira, that challah, it could be there's no problem of changing the order. The fact that Mishnah mentions challah between Maser Rishon and Maser Sheni sounds like min Torah. It doesn't really matter when you can separate challah. Maybe with Rabbanan you have to separate it after Maser Rishon before Maser Sheni. Now, why are the Chachamim saying this? V'lama kadma Rishon. Why should Maser Rishon come before challah? Why do we put it in the middle? Surely we should put challah first because it says rashis. So the Gemara answers, Renesha kadma legoren. Maser Rishon comes before challah because the chiyuv of hafrosha comes while it's already in the store there, when the malachas, the process has been finished, before it's been ground for flour, made into a dough, and that's when the challah obligation comes. So even if you delayed the hafrosha of maser until after it's become a dough and chayav challah, but Maser Rishon really came first, the chiyuv came first. Now Maser Sheni also was already in the goren in this processing before the chiyuv challah came about. Now, if you're saying wherever the chiyuv came first should be first in hafrosha, we should be mafresh Maser Sheni first. But the Mishnah says no, you put challah between Maser Rishon and Maser Sheni. Amar Batalia, Bedina Shedidim Challah L'Kol. You know something? What challah should really come before all maestros. because Chala is called Rishis. V'lama kadma Rishon. Why Maser Rishon first? Neshu kadma lagoin, because the Chiv HaFosha came already in the store, in the processing there, before Chiv Chala came about. V'kasa by Rishis. And you have that extra word Rishis as well. And therefore it says Rishis like Chala, right? Just like Truma has got reference Rishis. And since you find it with Chala, therefore it comes before, Truma comes before Chala, but Maser Sheni, Avapisha kadma lagoin. You're right, the processing might have happened first, but there's no reference to Rashis there, ain't caused by Rashis. Therefore, Chala, which has got a reference Rashis, comes first. So that's why you have Maser Rishon, then you have Chala, and then you have Maser Sheni. Right. Alright, so now, we spoke about how it can be Mafresh Demai in one go, on all the various Masalas you're giving to the Cohen. We spoke about Chala and Trumas Maser. Now, how you can be Mafresh, similarly, now from Tebel, Tebel Vadai, you've got Truma Gedola and you've got Trumas Maser. So Harav to have is Truma, you want to separate Truma, or Trumas Maser Ke'echad, and Trumas Maser in one go. Noitel, again you have a designated area, and you're going to designate Echad Mishloshim V'Shlosha V'Shlish, which is 1 in 33 and a third, which is roughly 3%. We say Echad V'Meh Mashesh Kan, 1 in 100 which I have in the fruit, Harezeh B'Sadzeh. This is part of my designated area. For now, it is chulin, right? For now, it is chulin. It remains tevel for now. Usually, chulin means fruit that has already been rectified, but here it doesn't mean that. Here it means fruit that you've not yet given it a name truma or maser. You've not yet done anything with it. Usha'ah, the remainder of the designated area, the remainder 2%, truma al hakol. That is truma on all the fruit. And now you go to that 1 in the 100. Which you said at the beginning, it should stay chulin for the time being. Or mea chulin sheyeshkan, that 1 in 100 which I said should be chulin. Harezeh b'sadzeh, next to that designated area is maser, ushar hamaser, and the remaining maser, which is samuch is next to it. So that 100th which I made maser in that designated area, so zeh shel sisi maser, that which I made maser in that designated area. And now you've sort of separated the remaining maser, and now that 100th is also Trumas Maser Olav, is now the Trumas Maser for that Maser Rishon. The Shah, and the remaining area of the designated area is Chala. Maser Sheni, B'Tzvayna, B'Drom, Maser Sheni is in the north or the south, and B'Chula al Amois, and is profaned onto the money which I have designated for it. Okay? Now this idea of 1 in 100, it doesn't mean all that there is. It's 1 in 100 of the quantity which will remain after separating Truma Gedola. Okay, that is the obligation of Maser. Right? So he says here, let's say you set aside a sar, you're saying 98% of the third of the sar will remain, chulin. Eventually it will come to as Maser. Two different numbers. Alright, we'll move on. Tani we learned in the Brisa. Harozah lahafish truma. You want to separate truma gedola or trumas maser v'chala ka'achas in one go. Noitel, you can be masaman. You can designate kedei truma or trumas maser and chala ka'achas in one go. V'kamahei. So how much is that? Echad me'esrim. Basically, it's 5%. So now we're adding in what we got here. We've got the truma, which is 2%. You got the trumas maser, which is 1%. And you got the chala, which is another 1 in 48, which is roughly 2%. So that's how you get your 5%. Right? Echad me'esrim is roughly 5%. And you say, Echad me'esrim kan 1 in the 100, which I have. Arehem b'sad zeh. This is for now chulin tevel. For now is nothing. It's not proper chulin. It's not fruit which has been corrected. It's chulin which has not yet had a name of truma or maser on it, and it's still tevel as it was. Right? So that 100th is still nothing. I haven't decided what it is. And another 1 in 48, which is next to it, right next to that 100th, which I said for the time being is chulin. That also for the time being is chulin. I've done nothing with it, so I've not yet given it a name chala yet. The hasha, the rest of the designated area, so that's another 2%, is truma al-kol. That is truma for the whole lot. And now you're going to talk about the bits which you separated in the beginning, which you hadn't decided what they were. From that designated area, which for now was still chulin, that 100th, which I said for the time being should be tevel, also maser, that is now becoming maser rishon, and of course, and the remaining maser rishon is all leading across it. and the rest of the Maaser is next to it, which is not designated area, the other 900ths. Now out of that designated area, which I said is the 1 in 100th, which was Maaser, that should be also Trumas Maaser Alav. That is now going to be Trumas Maaser on the rest of the Maaser Rishon. V'hashar, and the remaining, that which I've left before Chulin when I didn't designate it yet, that will be Chala. That remaining 1 in 48, that will be the Chala. Yeah? Or Maaser Sheni, B'tzvayna, B'dromai, and Maaser Sheni is going to be in the north or in the south of the loaf, whatever it is, Mechula Lamois, and it's redeemed onto the money that I have designated for that purpose. Okay? Rosh Shmuel Bar Nachman Shem Rav Yonasan. Now, how many brachas are you going to make when you're designating all these things? So the first opinion says, Sofa Varech Chomesh brachas, 5 brachas, 1 bracha for each name that you're calling. Truma, Maaser Rishon, Trumas Maaser, Chala, Maaser Sheni. But Tani Rav Chia led Kaila brachas. You put them all into 1 bracha. Right? You're separating all 5 in one go. So you do 1 bracha that includes them all. Some say the Lashon is Lahafrish Trumas and Maasros. Trumais includes Truma Gedola, Trumas Chala, and Maasros includes Maaser Rishon and Maaser Sheni. Some say, even in 1 bracha, you have to single them out. So Sheki Yishonim says, Lahafrish Truma, or Maaser or Trumas Maaser, V'chala, or Maaser Sheni. You have to say all 5, according to some. And the Mefarshim ask, if you're going to include all 5 in 1 bracha, we usually have a rule, Einais in mitzvahs, Chavidas, right? You can't just throw all the mitzvahs together. There's another bracha, Al Pidyon Maaser Sheni. This is the 6th bracha. But the Gemara doesn't mention it. Sounds like Rechia agrees you can't include it with the others. You can't include it with the Hafrosha elements, right? Pidyon Maaser Sheni. It's completely separate. We only mentioned the brachas where Rechia argues with Rav Yonasan, where you include it together, but not a bracha where everyone agrees it's a separate bracha in its own right. Okay? Ad Kedun Ben Levi. So it's all very well. Now, how do we learn? You can be mafish Truma and Trumas Maaser in one go. Now, that's all very well. You can be mafish or Cohen or Levi like that, because they're Zocha and the Maaser Rishon for themselves. They can separate Trumas Maaser out of the Maaser Rishon because they can acquire it, right? But Yisrael, if he's going to tell me that he's mafish Trumas Maaser, well, how can he nimsa mafresh out of a sheina shalai? How can he mafresh Trumas Maaser out of Maaser when the Maaser is not his? It belongs to a Levi, right? He's being mafresh something which is not his for something which is not his. That Rosh should be chal. Maaser Rishon, and you're separating Trumas Maaser, is not his, it belongs to the Levin. So the mission of the Brisa, which tell you how to be separating Truma and Trumas Maaser in one go, must be Cohen and Levi, but Yisrael can't do that. Now the Gemara does explain, why does the mission have to tell me first that 1 in 100 should be chulin for the time being, and after that we make the remainder the bit which is designated as truma, and then to give it a name Maaser, Trumas Maaser, on that 100th which I set aside, and I never said exactly what it was. Now we could have gone a much simpler way. First Maaser Rishon, right? First called Maaser Rishon was Trumas Maaser, and then after that Truma Gedola. Why not change the order? Do Maaser Rishon and then Trumas Maaser, and then sort out the Truma. Well, first Truma Gedola, and then Maaser Rishon and Trumas Maaser, without first saying the bit which I'm going to be Trumas Maaser will for the time being be Chulin. Why say all that? So he says you can't do that, because if you did, if you already gave a name Maaser on that 1 in 100, right, together with the other 9 next to it, and then you want to separate Truma, you can't do that, Rabbi. Say you can't give a name Maaser before Truma, right? Truma has to come first. Nimsa Magdim, you end up putting the Afrosha of Maaser before the Afrosha of Truma Gedola. You can't do that. And if you're going to tell me, you're not going to say first that 1 in 100 will be Chulin for the time being. You'll give it a name straight away, Truma, right? Truma Gedola on the 200th. Straight away give it a name Truma. If you do that, the Achach Maaser, and then you give the name Maaser on the remainder, you'll end up, if you just start by saying 2%, you'll end up making too much or too little on your maestros. You're going to be mafish Trumas Maaser less than 100th, or maybe more than 100th, and not exactly 100th. We want you to be exactly 100th. We don't want it to be more or less. And you shouldn't do it. This Kadada Tani we've learned in a Brisa, if you end up bringing less from your maestros, your maestros might be sorted. but your remaining fruit will have trouble. Or peirosim mekukolin. Hamadif al masros. If you increase your meiser too much, masoisim mekukolin, your maestros will be ruined, or peirosim mekukolin, but your fruits might remain okay. So basically, we want you to be mesamen. We want you to designate how much you're doing, which is 3% from all the fruit, but not exact. And first, we want to say, out of the designated area, 100th exactly, for now, will be chulin. We don't want you to give a name Maser Rishon meanwhile, because we don't need to give a name Maser Rishon before we give you a name of Truma. And after that, you give a name Truma Gedola on the remaining, which is 200th Bekiru, but not exact. And after that, you can go and give a name Maser and Trumas Maser on the 100th, which is what you've set aside as chulin for the time being. So he's got an example here. He says if you've got 100 sar, you have to separate 10 sar for Maser Rishon, and the other 90 will be chulin. If you only separate 9 sar for Maser Rishon, then you're going to rectify 90 sar out of the produce. 81 will be chulin, and 9 will be Maser Rishon, and the 10 sar will remain tevel. So it comes out that the 9 sar that you separated from Maser will be a bit extra as far as Maser Rishon is concerned. Remember, this is the idea that you're separating too much Maser, your remaining fruit will be in trouble. But the remaining 91 sar will be a mixture of tevel and chulin with tukonin. There'll be 81 chulin, but 10 tevel. And you won't be allowed to eat it. It'll be mixed up with all forbidden mixtures. And similarly, if you've got 100 sar Maser Rishon, if you separate only 9 for Trumas Maser, you should have done 10. You only separated 9. So then, the 9 sar, that's fine. That will be mafresh. That will be all Trumas Maser that the Cohen can eat. But the 91 remaining will be problematic. There'll be a mixture of Maser Rishon, which you've corrected, and Maser Rishon, which is still not had Trumas Maser separated against it. So again, you're going to have mixtures there. So if you don't do enough, so we want you to do exactly what's required. We want you to have Trumas Maser should be 100th of the mixture. Okay? Then just to finish, he says here as well, let's say the case of 100 sar, if you separate 11 sar for Maser, then the 89 is proper chulin. Within that 11, 9 and 8 ninths in Maser Rishon, there's always a ninth of the chulin which is corrected. So if you had 100 sar and you separated 10 for Maser, then that 10 is a ninth of the 90 which is corrected. If you're only masakin 89, then Maser will be a ninth of the 89, which is 9 and 8 ninths, and the sar and the ninth, which are remaining, which you separated, will be tevel, because they never became Maser, and there's no other tevel that you should have Maser on it. It doesn't become chulin b'sukkon. You didn't separate any Maser to cover it. So the 11 sar of Maser will be a mixture of Maser and tevel, which you won't be able to eat it. And if you had 100 sar of Maser Rishon, you separated 11 sar for Trumas Maser, the 11 sar will be a mixture of Trumas Maser and Maser Rishon, which has not yet had Trumas Maser corrected for it. Okay, I think we will stop here.